And this is a special report from the Equalist. All right, everybody, gather around. It's story time. Income tax return season. Everybody's favorite time of the year, right? Yes, it is. Not for everybody, though. And of course, millions of Americans will go ahead and file for joint that are married, correct? But what if your spouse a very, very long time ago tried to go to online courses and it turned out to be a fraudulent college? And they slapped them with around $60,000 and they never signed the paperwork. It was all forged. Well, since, the government didn't go ahead and check to see if it was fraudulent, even after they told them it was fraudulent, they still hit them off with it, and now they have that credit report for it. So now you're in debt, $60,000, and oh yeah, that's right, there is an interest rate, so it keeps on going up little by little. So inevitably, they start taking away your income tax. Oh yeah, and since you didn't pay it all because you only get back around, I don't know, maybe 3,000, 4,000 at most, they start garnishing your paycheck as well. Betsy DeVos. Yeah, apparently she is the head of education, right? For the Department of Education. Let's see what her real credentials really are. So I go on the government website and they talk about her life, about her marriage, about this and that, yada, yada, yada. But then you come to find out where is her past history in the education system.
Ms. DeVos, many of my Democratic colleagues have pointed out your lack of experience in K-12 public schools, but I'd like to ask you about your qualifications for leading the nation on higher education. The Department of Education is in charge of making sure that the $150 billion that we invest in students each year gets into the right hands and that students have the support they need to be able to pay back their student loans. The Secretary of Education is essentially responsible for managing a $1 trillion student loan bank and distributing $30 billion in Pell Grants to students each year. The financial futures of an entire generation of young people depend on your department getting that right. Now, Mrs. DeVos, do you have any direct experience in running a bank?
Senator, I do not.
Have you ever managed or overseen a $1 trillion loan program?
I have not.
How about a $1 billion loan program?
I have not.
Okay, so no experience in managing a program like this. How about participating in one? I think it's important for the person who is in charge of our financial aid programs to understand what it's like for students and their families who are struggling to pay for college. Mrs. DeVos, have you ever taken out a student loan from the federal government to help pay for college?
I have not.
Have any of your children had to borrow money in order to go to college?
They have been fortunate not to.
Have you had any personal experience with a Pell Grant?
Not personal experience, but certainly friends and students with whom I've worked.
So you have no personal experience with college financial aid or management of higher education. Mrs. DeVos, then let's start with the basics. Do you support protecting federal taxpayer dollars from waste, fraud, and abuse?
Absolutely.
Oh, good. So do I. Because now we all know that President-elect Trump's experience with higher education was to create a fake university, which resulted in his paying a $25 million to students that he cheated. So I'm curious about how the Trump administration would protect against waste, fraud, and abuse at similar for-profit colleges. So here's my question. How do you plan to protect taxpayer dollars from waste, fraud, and abuse by colleges that take in millions of dollars in federal student aid?
Senator, if confirmed, I will certainly be very vigilant.
Yeah, I'm asking how. How are you going to do that? You said you're committed.
The individuals with whom I work in the department will ensure that federal monies are used properly and appropriately, and I will look forward to working with you.
So you're going to subcontract making sure that what happened with universities that cheat students doesn't happen anymore?
No, I didn't say
You're going to give that to someone else to do? I just want to know what your ideas are for making sure we don't have problems with waste, fraud, and abuse.
I want to make sure we don't have problems with that as well. And if confirmed, I will work diligently to ensure that we are addressing any of those issues.
Well, let me make a suggestion on this. It actually turns out that there are a whole group of rules that are already written and are there, and all you have to do is enforce them. So what I want to know is, will you commit to enforcing these rules to ensure that no career college receives federal funds unless they can prove that they are actually preparing their students for gainful employment and not cheating them?
Senator, I will commit to ensuring that institutions which receive federal funds are actually serving their students well.
And so you will enforce the gainful employment rule to make sure that these career colleges are not cheating students?
We will certainly review that rule.
You'll review it, you will not commit to enforce it?
And see that it is actually achieving what the intentions are.
I don't understand about reviewing it. We talked about this in my office. There are already rules in place to stop waste, fraud, and abuse. And I don't understand how you can not be sure about enforcing them. You know, swindlers and crooks are out there doing backflips when they hear an answer like this. If confirmed, you will be the cop on the beat. And if you can't commit to use the tools that are already available to you in the Department of Education, then I don't see how you can be the Secretary of Education. And I look forward to having a second round of questions.
Wow, so she doesn't have any experience at all, and she is holding on to plans worth trillions of dollars. And I stumbled onto this. Let's investigate, shall we? Alright, so Kim previously ordered DeVos to stop collecting federal loans from former Corinthian college students who applied for loan forgiveness after the chain shut down in 2015 amid allegations of fraud. The Obama administration sought to make it easier for defrauded students to get loans forgiven, but the Trump administration has worked to tighten the rules. The Education Department acknowledged in September that it continued to collect loans from more than 3,000 former Corinthian students, prompting Kim's response. What? So, the Education Department rejects 99% of applications for loan forgiveness programs. That was Betsy DeVos. The Education Department approved just 661 of 54,000 applications it received between May 2018 and May 2019. The department has spent just $27 million of the $700 million Congress allotted for the program. I'm just going to go ahead and read this verbatim. Over 45,000 students forced to repay loans by mistake, DeVos says. According to the Project on Predatory Student Lending, 75% of students subjected to involuntary collections had to borrow money at high interest rates to cover expenses such as food, rent, childcare, and transportation. Some had their electric service cut off, while others reported repeated late fees of $25 to $100 for utility bills as a result of involuntary collections. The project found some borrowers were even evicted due to inability to pay rent, and one individual was fired from her job after her car was repossessed because she could not make the payments.
And I want to follow up on the thing Ms. Lee mentioned about the cuts to Special Olympics. Do you know how many kids are going to be affected by that cut, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Pocan, let me just say again, we had to make some difficult decisions with this budget.
Again, this is a question on how many kids, not about the budget.
I don't know the number of kids.
It's 272,000 kids. That's all. I'll answer it for you. That's okay. No problem. It's 272,000 kids that are affected.
Is an awesome organization, one that is well supported by the philanthropic sector as well.
Sure. I'll tell you, reclaiming my time if I could, Madam Secretary, because there's a couple more parts to this. So also, we have cuts that go in the special education grants to states from $3 million to $2.2 million, a 26% cut. And then also in this budget, you have a $7.5 million cut to the National Technical Institute for the Blind, a $13 million cut for Gallaudet University, a $5 million cut for federal program for print books for blind students. And you recently had a federal judge rule against us on some areas around special education. I have two nephews with autism. What is it that we have a problem with children who are in special education? Why are we cutting all of these programs over and over within this budget?
Well, sir, we have continued to retain the funding levels for IDEA and held that level. So in the context of a
I'm sorry, I don't think I
in the
brought up IDA.
context-
I believe I brought up Special Olympics, special education grants to states, the National Technical Institute for the Blind, Gallaudet University, federal program for printing books. So if you could address those, that's the question. I
But
would really
I will
appreciate it.
address the broader question around.
Or if you could
supporting
actually address
students
the
with
question I
special-
asked. That's even a better way to answer a question.
Supporting students with special needs, we have continued to hold that funding level, that funding at a level amount, and in the context of a budget proposal that is a 10% reduction.
All right, I'll reclaim my time. I'll reclaim my time. You're not going to answer the question.
One final question. Do you think that guns have any place in or around schools?
I think that's best left to locales and states to decide. If the underlying question is,
You can't say definitively today that guns shouldn't be in schools?
well, I will refer back to Senator Enzi and the school that he was talking about in Wapiti, Wyoming. I think probably there, I would imagine that there's probably a gun in the school to protect from potential grizzlies.
Let me ask you, go into another area. You are the chair of the President's School Safety Commission. That was formed after the school shooting in Florida left 17 students and educators dead. Our country is now averaging a school shooting each week. In fact, one day after the commission met last month, another 10 students and teachers were killed in Santa Fe, Texas. I understand your commission intends to release its recommendations by the end of the year. Will your commission look at the role of firearms as it relates to gun violence in our schools?
Thanks, Senator, for that question, and it is an honor to serve and to lead this commission. We are focused on the 20-some different provisions.
Will you
that
be
the-
looking, I know, I understand there's a lot, but I'm also thinking the chairman has difficulties. So I'm trying to give you a question that could be answered yes or no. Will your commission look at the role of firearms as it relates to gun violence in our schools?
That is not part of the commission's charge per se.
I see. So you're studying gun violence, but not considering the role of guns.
We're actually studying school safety and how we can ensure our students are safe at
well,
school.
You're studying things like how much time they spend on video games and all that, but you can go to a lot of other countries where they spend just as much time, but have only a tiny fraction of the shootings that we do. The gun of choice for mass shooters is an AR-15. Do you believe an 18-year-old high school student should be able to walk into a store, minutes later come out with an AR-15 style gun and hundreds of rounds of ammunition?
Well, sir, I know that this body and your counterparts on the other side of the Capitol have addressed a number of these issues, and I know that you're going to continue to debate them and discuss them.
I try to give you questions that could be answered yes or no. Let me repeat it in case I wasn't clear.
Thank
Do
you.
you believe an 18-year-old high school student should be able to walk into a store and minutes later come out with an AR-15 style assault weapon and hundreds of rounds of ammunition?
I believe that's very much a matter for debate, and I know that's been debated within this body and will continue to be. Our focus is on raising up successful, proven techniques and approaches to ensuring schools are safe for students to
Are
attend.
you looking at those other countries where the students have spent just as much time on social media and video games and everything else, but have a much lower gun violence in their schools?
We had a very important meeting last week in Maryland at a school within a district that has employed an approach called PBIS for 16 or 18 years that deals
I'm sorry,
with.
maybe I didn't make my question clear. Are you looking at some of those countries where the students do just as much time on video games, have just as much time on social media as we do, but do not have gun violence? Are you looking at those at all? That's a yes or no.
Not per se.
Thank you. So we'll look at gun violence in schools, but not look at guns. An interesting concept.
And do you know why I'm upset? Because I'm one of those 45,000 as well. Ms. DeVos, give us back our money.